In 2019, we purchased an investment property with a partner in Scottsdale, Arizona, and have been managing it remotely for the past few years. Even though we live a couple of hours away, we've been really happy with the performance of the property. Bookings are steady, guest feedback is great, and we were even fortunate enough to be accepted into Airbnb's Plus program before they stopped accepting new applicants. We're sharing all of that not to brag, but to show that it is possible to remotely operate a top-performing short-term rental property that doesn't skimp on quality or the guest experience. But it's not always easy. There are tricks and systems that you can put in place to get your STR operating like a well-oiled machine, even from hundreds or thousands of miles away. We're sharing some serious hosting and management secrets in this video, so be sure to stick through to the end for the good stuff.
What's up, everyone? I'm Steven.
And I'm Kylie, and you might notice that we're filming in a new location this week.
Yeah, we're actually at a property called Saguaro, which is in Scottsdale, Arizona.
This is one of 7 properties that we currently manage remotely. Our distances from these properties range from about a 2.5-hour car drive away to over 1,300 miles away. And while it's definitely easier to manage a property locally, it's certainly possible to manage it remotely.
Today, we're going to talk about some top tips for managing remotely. Some of these are pretty well known, but some are things that we think are pretty unique and pretty genius that we've come up with ourselves.
Let's start with the most well-known tip, and that is setting up your teams. If you watch basically any YouTube video about remote management of a short-term rental property, you're going to see this included on the list. So we're not going to go into a ton of detail about teams because we're not like reinventing the wheel here, but basically you're going to need to come up with a reliable team that can help you out with these jobs. First is cleaning. This is someone who is going to be coming into the house after each guest and cleaning it. They're also going to be reporting any damages to you and preparing the house for the next guest.
And the next one is a handyman or handy person. I mean, it's probably good to have some relationship with at least a couple because you're going to end up with kind of unexpected maintenance items that come up, and you might only have like a 5-hour turnover window. And the first guy, if you only got one, maybe he's not available, committed to some other job. Having a couple that you can call on is something you want to set up.
If you aren't super familiar with your area, you could try asking your real estate agent for recommendations. They might know someone.
Or also Nextdoor. We've looked around, or the review sites like Yelp and Google reviews.
And speaking of Nextdoor, you could also ask your next door neighbor. If you didn't catch our video on getting to know your neighbors and why that's important, you can check out that video. And then for most properties, you'll need to get a gardener for regular maintenance and also annual tree trimmings and things like that. And if applicable, you'll also need a pool cleaner.
Get a good pool cleaner set up if you have a pool. Also make sure you understand your pool person's capabilities. Some just do regular service and maybe they have another person or a recommendation for someone who does like equipment repairs. Maybe they do it all, but just fully understand, what that relationship is before you start renting.
Our go-to pool guy in the Coachella Valley, he does strictly cleanings and maintenance. He doesn't touch the equipment. So we have another guy that we have to call if something goes wrong with the equipment, or sometimes the other guy is this guy.
This guy. Yeah, I basically become a pool man.
And then there's pest control. It's important to have regular pest control at your property. At least that's our experience in the markets that we operate in. Maybe you don't have any bugs where you live, but I kind of doubt it.
These things we've talked about so far are all pretty well known, but then there's a unique position, and that's the role of an inspector.
The inspector is basically the final set of eyes on the property after the cleaners are finished and before the guests arrive. So they're there to make sure everything is picture perfect. Everything's in its place, exactly like your listing photos, for the most consistent and 5-star guest experience. We call this process the perfection inspection, and we're actually planning out a whole video on this topic, so be sure to hit subscribe so you can be the first to see it in a couple weeks.
Because we're about 4 hours away from Scottsdale, 2.5 hours from San Diego, and then 1,300 miles away from our property in northern Idaho, which you should check out in the description below, the inspector role is really essential. There are boots on the ground, not only for the inspections, but they can also help, with a lot of coordination tasks.
You'll sleep a lot better at night if you have someone that you can trust, that you know that you can call if something goes wrong. Some people may call this role a co-host, but there are some differences. Co-host typically helps you out with correspondence, communication with guests, and currently our inspectors don't take on that role. Our second tip is to just set yourself up for success by making sure your property is fully stocked with the correct amount of linens and towels to facilitate same-day turnovers. At our locally managed properties, we usually have 2 sets of everything, but at our remote managed properties, we have 3 just in case. I'll clarify that a little bit. We don't have 3 sets of towels because that would be a lot of towels, because we always have 2 per guest in the house when the guest is here. So if you have 8, that's 16, and then a double set of that is 32. So we don't have another 16 on top of that. That's just kind of an obnoxious amount of towels.
Yeah, and thankfully we have a lot of storage at this property, so we can stock up on supplies that usually carry us through to our next visit.
We know that's not possible for everybody. Some properties don't have the luxury of having a lot of storage.
But that does bring up a point, when you are looking at properties as a potential investment for short-term rental, have storage in mind. You're concerned about the house, but look at the storage because it's going to be important whether or not you're managing locally or remotely.
Another setup tip, try not to put in things in your remotely managed properties that are kind of fussy or require a lot of extra attention. The biggest example of this is using real plants versus fake plants. We've shared this story before, but when we first started out, our first property was a duplex property. We lived in the downstairs unit, we were house hacking, and the upstairs unit we were listing as a short-term rental. I did decorate with real plants in that first property because we were on site and we were doing the cleanings ourselves. We had the ability to tend to the plants. So then when we bought this property, I still had that same mindset and I put real plants everywhere. I bought like easy care ones, but they ended up all dying. I think we have 2. I'm looking at them in our kitchen. We have 2 left that have survived over the past couple years. Everything else has been replaced with faux.
And say what you want about faux plants, but there are some good ones out there. You're gonna pay for it. They are expensive, but when you think about the cost of replacing real plants several times, you can justify the cost of a nice faux plant. Our next tip is to document everything. You want to be prepared to respond to any question that a guest throws at you. And that's not just the case for remotely managed rentals. If locally managed ones, this is true too.
This is our pro tip right here. So pay attention, and it's a 3-part.
The first is that we use the shared note feature on iPhones, and we have one for every property. We put important details in there, the address, the owner information if it's a managed property.
It's a cheat sheet.
If there's any codes or passwords to our TV accounts, for example, or what day the pool man services the property and the landscapers. Basically, it's a quick reference sheet for anything we might need to know.
Second is we have a photo album on our phone that documents pretty much every single detail of the house. And this isn't just listing photos, these are more like reference photos. So think about opening every cabinet and taking a picture of what's inside so that if the guest says, hey, where's the slow cooker? You can say it's in the second drawer to the right of the stove or whatever it is. And then speaking of stove, you should be taking pictures of the serial numbers in case you need to have some sort of maintenance done. Or you can use that serial number to look up the user manual and help a guest through troubleshooting an issue. Some other examples of things you can take photos of are sink and shower fixtures so that you know exactly how those work, and you can talk a guest through it if you have like a quirky shower that needs to be pulled out and then twisted or something like that.
Basically just walk through the house and try and anticipate any guest question about how something works or detail about something and take a photo or video of that thing.
Yeah, so third, I guess, is video. We like to walk through the entire interior and the exterior of the house and basically just narrate to ourselves everything that's around us. So which light switch works with which light, and this outlet has a GFCI on it.
Yeah, we also look at, on the exterior where this, if it is on the exterior, where the circuit breaker panel is, where water shutoff is for the house, where hose bibs are. You won't remember it later, especially if you have a few properties, and having the photos or video to look back on is super important.
Even if you do remember everything that you come across, then, walking through it in this way just makes you really get to know your property so that you can answer questions quickly. Kind of going along with this, one thing that we like to do is if we have a feeling that there's going to be a question that's coming up a lot with guests, put it in your house manual, but also take a picture of it. Sometimes guests don't read the house manual and they just go and ask you. One good example that we have is one of the properties that we manage. There's some exterior lights where it's a little bit tricky to find the light switch for it. So we have a picture of it and an arrow pointing to where the switch box is. And every time a guest asks for it, we just send them that photo and then they can find it really quickly. Another one that we send out a lot is there's a community pool at one of our places, and again, even though we have instructions in the house manual, people will call us or text us and say, I'm so lost, I can't find the pool. And then we have a saved screenshot of a Google Map image where we've drawn out a line from the house to the pool and then just send them that, and they usually find their way.
Our fourth tip is to create a bit of an oops plan. This is something where you have a plan in place if you're not able to drive something over to a guest.
Hopefully you have an inspector and they are doing that final check on the property, but we're all human, we all make mistakes. We've done it ourselves when we're checking properties. Maybe you forgot to put a sponge under the sink or something like that.
Or another common one is dead batteries. There's a couple ways to combat these things.
The first is to sort of hide things in plain sight. So like Stephen mentioned batteries. Here at Saguaro, we keep a little like Tupperware full of a little selection of batteries you might need for the TV remotes or maybe a 9-volt for the garage door keypad. And we hide it in this upper cabinet, not hide it, but we put it in this upper cabinet kind of towards the back where guests aren't necessarily going to be using that for anything. And if they do report that something went dead, then we can tell them where to find the batteries.
We also kind of have another oops cabinet. In this case, it's in the garage. We keep kind of a starter pack of supplies, a few rolls of toilet paper, sponges, trash bags, things like that. In case one of those items didn't get restocked, we can just point the guests there.
It's an upper cabinet that they probably wouldn't be going into unless they're kind of snooping around. And the last thing that we prepare ourselves with is we have a Target Shipped membership. And this allows us to get free delivery, same-day delivery, usually within 2 hours from the local Target store to the property. It's not 100% free. You do need to tip the shopper, but it is a convenient way to get other things delivered to the house. So if your coffee maker breaks, you could have one delivered in 2 hours if you need to.
We'll also sometimes like add on a few dollar thing, like maybe a thing of juice boxes if there's kids.
Sorry we messed up. Here's a little treat.
Yeah. There's other companies that offer similar services. You know, Walmart has their Plus program. There's Instacart. There's others, but
see what's available in your area. But we do like Target because we can get other things that aren't just grocery items. We really don't like to be reactive managers. We like to be prepared, and we like our guests to have, you know, a worry-free experience and everything's already provided for them. But this is a really good backup, even at places where you're local. Maybe you're going out of town for the weekend or something like that, just to have that backup in place.
The fifth tip that we have is what we call the +2 rule. Basically what we realized is anytime we visit here or in San Diego, we always found ourselves like racing around to like finish the things that the house needed. You know, you find some unexpected maintenance item. You never get time to actually relax or enjoy the house. So we always plan about 2 extra days on every trip, just as, you know, a buffer, because you never know what you're gonna find, and it does leave you some time to relax and enjoy the house.
Every time we came out here, we would extend our trip by 2 days. Every single time.
Yeah.
And every time we would say, oh, next time we're gonna stay a little bit longer. And yeah.
So we
+2 rule.
Yeah.
We have a pretty good routine now. We made a checklist of everything that we like to inspect or inventory, some routine maintenance items that we like to do every single time we visit. So we usually work off of that checklist, and it does help kind of speed things up a little bit, knowing exactly what we need to get done.
Like checking all the linens for stains, inventorying all your kitchen items, walking around the exterior of the property looking for any drainage or settling or leaks.
So back to this +2 rule. These 2 days are really property-focused days. The first day is usually the day that we arrive, and we're spending a lot of the time on that first day checking everything in the house, doing our inventories, and kind of seeing if we need to add anything to our checklist to get done during this day. And then the second day is sort of our implementation day. And this is usually towards the end of this day because it gives us time if we need to go out and buy something or order something and have it delivered to the house. This is a pretty simple tip, but it's really the checklist and implementing the checklist for your specific property that's really going to help you on your visits.
Managing a property remotely is always going to have a little higher stress factor, at least in our experience. But hopefully with these tips and doing a little planning up front, it'll make things a little easier on you.
And if you missed that video that we mentioned before about getting to know your neighbors next to your short-term rentals, then you can check that out right here.
Yeah, thanks, and we'll see you in the next video.
See ya.